In today's video, I'm going to talk about all the different thicknesses or what we call grades of wafer paper, what do you do with them respectively, and for the second part of the video, I'll be teaching you how to make these simple to make yet gorgeous looking Monstera leaves that you can use on your cake designs. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Winifred and I've been doing cake decorating and sugar flowers for about 10 years now. In this channel, I share all about creating edible sugar flowers and equip you guys with good quality knowledge for making beautiful flowers and cake designs. Once you're ready, let's get started. There are mainly 3 different grades of thickness of wafer paper which are more commonly used out there in the market. They are the 0.22mm one, O grade, the 0.27mm or the 0.3mm, AD grade, and lastly, the 0.65mm, DD grade. The link to purchase this wafer paper is provided in the description box below. So what do we do with each of them? Let's start with the 2 thinner ones. When I make my wafer paper flowers, I personally hover between the 0.22mm one and the 0.27mm one. Both works perfect for me. The only main difference for the flowers that are made from these 2 different thicknesses is that the 0.22mm one feels a lot more flexible and bendable as compared to the 0.27mm one. Here's a quick example of some sweet peas I recently made. The one on the left is made from the 0.22mm one, and the one on the right is made from the 0.27mm one. You can see that the one on the right just feels slightly stiffer. Not too big of a deal if you ask me, so if you're not too concerned with how it feels when you touch it, it doesn't really matter which one you choose. That's why I just hover between both of them. But if you're new to wafer paper, given how sensitive wafer paper is to the liquid control you have, I would highly recommend you to start with the 0.27mm one. Since it's slightly thicker, it is somewhat more forgiving in your learning journey. I personally started with the 0.27mm one too. Now onto the 0.65mm one. As you can see, this guy is definitely too thick for making delicate looking wafer paper flowers like the ones you just saw. So what can we do with this? These guys are perfect for creating pieces like our Monstera leaves or this piece of painting that I've done for a dummy cake that I never really got around finishing, just being honest here. Well, basically they work very well for making sturdy pieces of work like these guys, which are mainly larger elements where you need them to hold up their structure very well on their own. And basically that is it. Those are the main differences of the different thickness of wafer paper and what you can do with them. Pretty straightforward. Now once you're ready, let's learn how to make some Monstera leaves out of the 0.65mm wafer paper. Here are all the tools and materials you'll need for making these leaves. All the information of these can be found in the workbook link provided in the description box below. In your workbook, you'll see the Monstera Leaves template. All you need to do is to print them out, cut them into pieces like this, place it over wafer paper, trace using a pencil, and use an X-Acto knife to trim it. You may also go ahead and cut out a lot of these in advance and just store them like how you usually store your wafer paper pieces. The colors I'm using here is Cream from Sugar Flare and Juniper Green from Wilton. You don't have to follow the exact colors I'm using here as long as you have a yellow tone and a cool green tone. And because this brand has glycerin in them, for my liquid, I'm using vodka to dilute them into a paintable consistency, and the reason why I do so is explained in the video link above here. Before I start painting, I've actually gone ahead to do a little color palette like this, so you guys can see very clearly the different colors I have in my Monstera leaves. It usually looks really overwhelming in a leaf like this, but if you were to break it down into separate colors like this, it doesn't look so scary anymore. And the whole process is really just layering these colors on top of each other, starting with the lightest colors and slowly moving towards the darkest one. And you can see it in the leaf here. The colors that I mix later on will never be exactly the same colors as this because I'm only human, but I'm gonna go pretty close so you guys can follow along. Note that I might also add some transitional colors in between as I paint because I'm just gonna follow with my intuition to get the look that I want. But these are roughly the colors you will see. Okay, before we start painting the leaves, you can either just paint it on the leaf like this, just as how you cut it, like a 2-dimensional one, and it will end up looking something like this. Just paint on one side, the other side is empty, so there's no popper or skewer. And then for this kind of leaves, you can just use it to kind of like paste it on the surface of your fondant cake or your buttercream cake. Or if today you want to make this Monstera leaf as a topper, this is a 22 gauge wire. You can also use a 20 gauge wire, something that's stiff enough to hold up your Monstera leaf. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna place this wire in between 2 leaves that we cut out, and then use like water to stick them together before we start painting. So this Monstera leaves actually acts as like a topper. So you can just use this to insert into your cake, however you want it to be. And in order to do that, it's pretty simple. You just get your wire, place it in between one of the leaves here, and all you need is to grab some water, place the water in the middle of the leaf, and then have your wire stick there. Because wafer paper is so sensitive to liquid, once you have water on it, it becomes really sticky. So you can just paint on different parts of the wafer paper, and then have the other wafer paper just go on top of it and they will stick. If they're not sticking, you just have to kind of like add in a little bit more liquid and then just press it down. And there you go, so something like that. You'll get a nice topper like this. And if they're not perfectly matched up, I'm just going to use my X-Acto knife and trim it, and I'll meet you back here when I'm done. Okay, so I'm gonna head to take out the colors and put them on our well here. So this is my cream color from Sugar Flare, and this is my juniper green from Wilton. So I like to keep the colors as they are on the wells, and later on, if I were to mix a new color, I'll pull them out into new wells here. So anytime I need the original color, I can always go back and pull out these colors from their respective wells. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to start with the lightest color over here. And if you look at the Monstera Leaves photo, the yellow actually represents the highlights of the Monstera Leaves. So in order to make a leaf look realistic, you need to have highlights and accents. So highlights are basically the lighter colors that shows when sunlight hits it. And then the darker colors are where the shadows are, right? So we're going to start with the lighter yellow over here. So I'm going to pull out a little bit of my cream color and just kind of dilute it well. I'm going for a very, very light color because I can always darken it, but I cannot lighten it up. So this is my paper towel to test out my color. Okay, so this looks like a really nice light cream, which is what I have over here. Looks pretty good. Let me just go slightly darker, maybe. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of like paint over the entire leaf. Since this is just a base color, it doesn't really matter the direction of my brush strokes because I'm just gonna give it a very nice foundational color at the bottom. So I want to leave no white spaces, mainly just on my pale yellow as my base color. Okay, don't worry if you just miss out any spots because once the color dries up, we can always come back and top out the colors again. So this is our nice base yellow color. And since I'm using alcohol, it actually dries up pretty quickly. So now I can move on to the darker yellow that I have, which is somewhere around here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out my cream and then add more liquid. Let me test out the color. Great, so this looks like a nicer, darker cream color we're going for. So now I'm gonna go ahead with this. And for this darker cream, I'm not gonna paint all over the base again. I'm just gonna pick up certain spots where I want it to really have the highlights shown. So maybe just somewhere around here, here, just some spots. So this is what the layering of color does. It actually provides contrast, so not everything is flat. Okay, so something like that. Okay, not too much. I just want a bit of yellow to kind of poke through. Anyway, the main color is going to be green. The yellow is just like a supporting color. And now that my yellows are done, we're going to move on to our green. So I'm not going to go straight into the darker green. I'm just going to start off with a transitional green, which is, you know, like a warm green, somewhere between a yellow and the cool green. So this provides a nice smooth transition of colors. So since we do not have a warm green, we can achieve warm green by just mixing the cream tone and the green color. So I'm just going to pick a little bit of each. This will give me my warm green. So you can see it's still green, but it has a tint of yellow inside, which helps with the very nice transition of colors from this all the way to this. So let me test out my green first. Okay, This looks pretty good. Let me just try it out on my leaf to see how it looks like. Okay, so it's like a nice soft green, so I think we can go with this. Looks like a nice base. So for this, similarly as well, I don't want to kind of cover up my yellow. I still want my yellow to shine, so maybe just picking some spots to paint. As you're painting, you want to kind of tap out the excess liquid as well, because you do not want too much liquid going onto your leaf. It might just kind of like create too much texture for your leaves. But also note that that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Just that if you do not want too much texture, then kind of like control the liquid control. And you can see now as I'm painting, I'm actually following the shape of the leaf as well, because I do not want to kind of go all over the place and it doesn't really show the veining or the texture style of a Monstera leaf. You want to kind of follow the shape like that. So let's do a quick check. It looks pretty good. It has a nice green base and I still can see my yellow kind of like popping out. Don't worry if your yellow is kind of like covered. We can always come back and top up the yellow later on, which I'm going to show you in a bit. But right now we're just going to focus on our green. So this is my base, kind of like my first soft green. And then I'm going to go slightly darker. And then what I'm going to do is just going to pull out more of green and more of my cream color. Okay, so this is a darker green. Looks a little bit too dark, maybe I'm just gonna dilute it slightly because I want to make sure that the color really transitions very well from one to the next. Okay. And then right now, maybe I'm just gonna again choose some spots to paint. If you're painting halfway and I realize that okay, maybe this green is too dark, you can always go ahead and dilute the green and then just kind of rewind back. You can see I'm carefully choosing the spots, not painting every bit, just leaving some parts untouched. This way I can really see all my kind of like textural lines coming out. And now we're ready to go darker. So more green and more cream. We're still staying within the warm green range. Since this color is made out of like the cool green and the cream, right? At any point, if you feel like you are ready to move into a cooler green, you can just go ahead and put more cool green into the mixture. And I'm tapping off the excess. I'm starting to put lesser and lesser painting because now I'm just trying to create the lines of my Monstera leaf, not so much of just painting the entire thing anymore. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pick out some parts and then just paint. I can start here as well. And I like using a brush with a sharp tip over here because it can help me see and draw these like lines that I'm looking for. If you're using a flat brush, you can obviously change the angle as well to draw that, so not too much of a problem. Okay, so you can see we're kind of like going into the territorials of the darker greens. I want to be very careful with my strokes, but still, just enjoy and have fun. Just remember that these guys are for drawing lines, so you do not want to kind of like paint all over. You can start to see our Monstera Leaves kind of coming to life. So the trick to kind of like doing leaves, be it painting or dusting, is to always make sure that you have all your different greens showing at different parts of your leaf. That kind of contributes to it look more realistic. You can even just draw a line in the middle if you want to just separate out the center and then use this as a guide. Okay, looking pretty good, ready to go into a darker green. So now I'm ready to move closer to the cool green that I have over here. So I'm just going to pick up some of my cool green, maybe put a little bit more liquid. So as you're painting, just play around. You can never really get the same exact color as you did before, but just understanding or being able to recognize the colors helps a lot. So you can see this is a much cooler green as compared to what we have here. Let's just see how it works out. Okay, I think it looks great. Because that was a little bit too much, so I'm tapping it away. Actually, I feel like I could have gone darker, so I'm just gonna go ahead and put more of the cool green. You can see I'm just choosing random spots to kind of like draw my lines. As I'm kind of like painting inwards, I'm also kind of like flicking my brush upwards so they don't create such a harsh line and the paint just kind of like fades away as it goes towards the spine of the leaf. And then I'm going to kind of play around with this as well. You can start from here and then you kind of flick outwards this way. And then here. So I also like my really dark colors to go along the edges of the leaves because I feel it helps to accent the entire kind of like outline of the leaf a lot nicer. So that's what I usually do. And then now I'm ready to go maybe just another shade darker. And this will be my accent. We can work somewhere around here. Just gonna go here as well. If this is too dark, then I'm gonna go ahead and lighten it. You can see I'm carefully making sure that I do not overlap too much of my green. I want different shades of green to kind of shine through my Monstera leaf. Okay, so I think I'm pretty good with my Monstera leaves. It's really hard to stop, but at some point you just need to stop because if not the entire thing will just look really flat against the colors. So you can see I have all kind of like my yellow kind of shining through at the bottom over here, the lighter one. So you can imagine the sunlight hitting it. That's where it has like a lighter color. And I have all these different lines showing all the textural lines of a Monstera leaves or how it will look like in watercolor, and making sure that they do not overlap each other so I can see the darker greens and I can see all my different layers of green. So watercolor is not too difficult if you kind of like break it down into this, and painting on the Monstera leaf is like a great way to start because there isn't really any flow except for following the lines like that. So if you're afraid to start, maybe Monstera Leaf will be a good place to kind of like, you know, get started and try out. Okay, so what if at this point you realize that, okay, my yellow is kind of covered up by my green and I want to bring back some of my yellow, you can go ahead and just kind of wash your brush first. Or you can also take a new brush. And then what I'll do is kind of like go back into my yellow and kind of like darken the yellow, and then I can kind of go back into the lighter spots to bring out my yellow. Okay, something like that. So if you want to stop here, perfectly fine. I think it's alright. Let's just have a closer look. You can see all the different lines, colors, layers. Okay, but let's just say you want the yellow kind of shine through a little bit more. This is my brush with my yellow. You can just go into the yellow parts, the lighter parts, and just kind of like bring back some of my yellow color. Since this is a very light shade of yellow, it will not kind of cover up our green. And I just kind of like blend the yellow inwards. And painting obviously only on the lighter part so that the yellow can shine through a lot easier. Okay, so there you go. Here's another closer look. So you can see now there is kind of like more yellow tone kind of shining out on the lighter parts to create more dimension. So it's not as flat as before. Okay, so this is just a quick comparison with the two Monstera leaves I painted. This is the one that I just did, and this is the one I did previously. So this is the one that kind of like doesn't have the topper, so it's just flat for me to paste it on my fondant cake. And you can see how different these two guys are, although I've applied the same techniques. So I want to let you know that they will never look the same, and it's totally fine. We need to just kind of embrace how our hands lead us as we paint and just follow along and learn in the process. Yeah, so this one has a little bit more yellow, and then this one has a lighter tone of yellow, but both kind of like has these different layers and dimension to it, which makes the Monstera leaves really kind of like pop. If you want to go ahead and go into the darker shade of green, please go ahead and do so as well. This is just my version of it. And okay, so sometimes when you're done, when there are a lot of liquid, your wafer paper tends to kind of curl up a little bit. So you can see it's kind of like curled up like that. Right? And what you can do is you want to kind of wait for the wafer paper to kind of like dry up to almost like 90-95%. And then when it's really dried up, what you want to do is, if you like it curled up, no problem, you can just leave it as it is. Personally, I think it has a little bit more kind of like characteristics with that. But if you do not want it to be curled up, what you want to do is, I'm just going to use this as an example. So what you want to do is just grab a very heavyweight book or something, and then just go ahead and kind of like flatten it. Preferably leave it for at least a few hours, or overnight would be best, so it stays nice and flat. If you try this out, don't forget to tag me on Instagram at Winifred Kristé Cake so I can see your beautiful Monstera Leaves. If you have any further questions, feel free to leave them in the comment box below and I'll get back to you. If you enjoyed this video, you also enjoy this tutorial where I share with you how to make these whimsical looking lunarias. Take care and I'll see you in the next video.